So we're going to take a look today at a message called "Does God Exist?" What as a disciple, really, what greater question is there, right? Even if you're not a disciple, what greater question is there than what path am I on, right? Am I on the right path? And so we're going to take a look at that today. First of all, okay. So who am I? Well, my name is Eric Gaizat. I am a team leader here in Indianapolis. I work for a company called Zone Laser Tag, and yes, I am the greatest laser tag player in this room. If we were at a laser tag place, I would prove it. I'm actually a marketing director for the Zone Laser Tag is the world's largest laser tag supplier. Like, we make the best in the pure fun. I helped create the team conference here in 2009. Man, it's like, where does the time go? I tell you what. And then I also run a web series called Counterslam. Anybody here play War Machine or Hordes? Probably not. And you won't care about that part. And I actually have a movie coming out here next month. It's called Another Man's Treasure. It's a documentary on collecting. Me and my twin brother actually made that. We just finished it up yesterday. So pretty excited about that. And as you can tell, my life is really boring. What? Yeah, my life is boring. So, all right. So we're going to take, like I said, about the existence of God. And what I want you guys to do is, if you guys have your Bibles, I want you guys to put them under your chairs. We're not gonna look at any scriptures. Maybe one at the end, but I'm not going to use the Bible to prove. Well, the Bible says in the first chapter there's a God. Duh. But that's because I remember when I was reaching out to on campus once, there was a guy, an atheist, who came up to me. I was actually out street preaching, and one guy, an atheist, came to me and he's like, "How can you prove to me that there's a God outside the Bible?" And at the time, I didn't have a great answer. But now that I've learned a lot, I put together this message. Like, we're actually going to take a look and prove there's a God. So, if you guys have any notes or piece of paper and a pen, what I would like you guys to do is write down, what would you do if you found out that God exists? Like, without a doubt, can't be proven wrong. God exists. What would you do? Would you start studying the Bible? Would you change something in your life drastically? I mean, it's a big question to ask, right? Because there's always that kind of doubt, right? Does God really exist? Is there really a God? But a lot of times we think about, if I knew for sure there was a God, I would totally live like this, or I would totally change this. Because we're going to come back to that. So, has anyone here ever laid in bed? Well, actually, let me know, how many people in here are disciples? How many baptized disciples? So just a few, okay. So maybe a lot of you haven't done this, but if you're a disciple, have you ever laid in bed and kind of lay awake at night and wondered, man, what if I'm wrong? What if there is no God? What if God, are you really there? What if we're wrong? And we're gonna address this because it's like, man, how do you get back to sleep? Well, what helps me, I think about the evidence and facts of my faith. Because when my emotions fail me, I take refuge in my rational mind. And you can too when your emotions start to get the best of you. And you can answer the question, does God exist, and get back to sleep. So what I'd like you guys to do is go ahead and just kind of relax. We're going to have a little philosophical discussion here and just reflect on what I'm about to tell you. If you guys want to take notes, great. But like I said, we're not going to use the Bible because, I think that sort of, it kind of creates some straw man arguments when you're like, well, the Bible says there's a God. So two things that this lesson can do. One, it can help save your life spiritually speaking. And two, there's a lot at stake. You bet your life. You're betting your life, and we're all in this game. So what is our ante? Anyone know what an ante is? It's like you're betting. What are you betting, right? So I want you guys to close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. And what I want you to do is I just want you to think about something. I just want you to think about the future. I want you to go as far as you can in your mind into the future. Maybe go, let's say 100 years in the future, 200 years, 300 years. What's it going to be like? 500 years, 700 years. Take a breath, mentally, just take a breath. Now I want you guys to go another 1,000 years in the future. 2,000 years in the future. 10,000 years in the future. just keep going in your mind, right? You're like, man, this is getting painful. When do I stop? The answer is, you never do. You never stop. That's what you're betting. Your life forever and ever. So go ahead and open up your eyes now. You can't be out of this game. Everyone has placed their bets somewhere, and that's why this is so important today. There's two things we're going to get off right off the bat and we're going to talk about. First thing, things exist, right? Whoa, big point right there. You don't say. Right? I probably could use this in like 4 or 5 parts of this presentation. Pretty much. So first thing, pretty simple. Things exist. Second thing is torturing babies for fun is wrong. And I'm not going to show you a picture of that because that's just wrong. So, but those two questions look at 2 different things. The first one looks at the physical truth. And then this one looks at something that we'll call moral truth. Torturing babies for fun is wrong. And there's only really 2 answers for both of those. Either you're right or wrong. Either things exist or they don't really exist. Or torturing babies for fun is wrong or it's right. So there's really not a whole lot of room to wiggle on both of these. So the first thing we're talking about, yeah, I found some pretty funny stuff. So when we talk about things exist, has anyone ever heard people argue the fact that like we don't really exist, like we're all just kind of a butterfly's dream, and we're like in the Matrix, or we're in someone else's dream. They're going to wake up and we're just going to vanish, right? So when someone says, but people will say that, but they're not like sitting in the middle of a freeway saying this stuff, right? I don't really exist. But when someone says I don't exist or I'm part of a butterfly's dream, what's the common denominator in both those sentences? I, right? Because you can doubt your experiences, but one thing you can't doubt is that you're doubting. There's a famous quote that says, "I think, therefore I am" by Rene Descartes. This is a little bit of a tweak on that since I'm a big gamer. I thought that would be funny. So, I am, therefore I am. But the existence for God, the argument for it, is called a cosmological argument. It's called, and the one we're going to look at today is called the Kalam argument. It's K-A-L-A-M. And it's been around for about 1,000 years, but the concept is pretty simple. Based on a notion that everything that comes into being has a cause. So there are 3 parts to this. Either the universe had a beginning or it didn't. Principle. If it did have a beginning, then it was either caused or it was uncaused. And if it was caused, was that cause personal or impersonal? You with me so far? Pretty simple? So I'm going to show that there is only one answer to each of these questions, that it did have a beginning, that it was caused, and that cause was personal. And I'm going to show that the universe cannot be infinitely old. Things that have a beginning are caused, and that cause must have been a personal being, and I'll give you the reasons why. So this is the basis for our argument right here. Because if I'm right, then this whole lesson is going to be proof that atheism is completely refuted. If you wake up tonight, you'll know that God is real, regardless of what's going on in your life, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. And you'll have a response to your atheist friends. So again, I'm going to ask, what would you do if you discovered there was a God? So whatever you wrote down, if you wrote something down, or if you're thinking of something, you're going to come back to it. So the first question, did the universe have a beginning? For hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, philosophers and scientists thought that the universe was infinite. It was everlasting, it's always been here, it'll always be here, which is nice and popular even today, even though a lot of scientists cling to theories that have been proven false because they don't want to believe that the universe the universe didn't have a beginning. So some of the most famous scientists have even cheated their information to try and cling to this idea, but the universe hasn't always been here. So this first part is actually going to be the hardest part of the entire message. It's all going to be downhill from here. So when we think about like accounting exercise, we're going to do like accounting exercise. Because numbers, when we think about infinite, numbers are potentially infinite, right? Mm-hmm. But it's never possible to count to infinity. In fact, we're going to try. So 1, 2, 3? No, okay, I'm not gonna count. But no matter how long I count, I'm always dealing with a finite number. I can't count, you can't count to infinity, and because you have to complete an you have to complete an incompletable series of numbers, or events is what we call it. When certain things happen, you can always ask like a 2-year-old, why this, why that? You ever heard little kids ever do that to you when they want to know something? Like, why is that, why is that, why is that, why is that? And you got to kind of break it down simpler and simpler and simpler. You know, it's sort of like that way with reality. We can't get to an infinite number of events by adding one event to another. You can't start from this point and look. You can't start from this point and look into the future and get to forever. You can't. And by doing that, you also can't look into the past and get that same either. So the universe can't be infinitely old, because you can't. Eventually, you're going to run out of whys. You're going to eventually hit an end. And because if the universe was infinitely old, right now, what's going on right now would be the completion of a number of infinite events. Every time you think about now, that's as far as you could get, because you could always be reaching that number that's higher. But you can't complete an infinite amount of events. Therefore, the universe cannot be infinitely old. As we start looking back at what caused this, what caused that, what caused this, eventually you're going to get to a starting point. So, how many of you have ever heard of the second law of thermodynamics? Anybody ever heard of that? Oh yeah. Can you tell me what it is?
No, I completely forgot.
Okay, that's all right. So, second law of thermodynamics states that the universe is losing energy and will eventually reach what's called universal heat death. So if you can imagine the universe as basically dark, not moving, no energy, no heat, just completely stopped and dead. That is eventually what our universe is coming to. There's only a finite amount of energy in the entire universe. So if you think about it, if the universe was infinitely old, it would have actually reached this universal heat death an infinite amount of time ago. But we haven't reached the universal heat death yet. And if the universe is winding down from something, then it had to be wound up at some point. Most of you guys have probably seen this guy here, Albert Einstein. Most of you know who he is. He created a theory about general relativity, which is a series of equations talking about, basically breaking down, he's basically found that the universe is expanding and decelerating at the same time. So it's expanding, but it's slowing down as well. And Einstein was looking at this and saying, well, what in nature causes something like that? And he figured it out was an explosion. So when we think about an explosion, we're talking about the beginning of the universe. What do you think we're talking about?
Big Bang.
Big Bang Theory, right? And I'm talking about the TV show. So Einstein thought if it came into being like that, with an explosion, then it had to have a creator. He actually theorized this, but he couldn't handle it. So this, believe it or not, Einstein is actually one of the guys who cheated. In 1917, he created what's called the cosmological constant argument, or theory, and he basically just inserted data showing that the universe was infinitely old, even though he knew this wasn't true. The problem was that he found there were his peers were looking at his work, and they were basically telling him, hey, look, you fudged the numbers here. This isn't right. And so for a couple of years, they really beat him up on it. And so eventually he withdrew. He basically explained that, yeah, that you're right, it's not true. And he even said that was his greatest mistake of his career, that he did that. Because he actually had an issue mentally with whether or not there was a God. And we'll get into that here in just a second. Because so, Albert Einstein was pretty smart. But even he, when he saw the idea that the Big Bang, and, had a creator involved in it, I guess it must have scared him too. He must have saw the ramifications of that. So his relativity equation has been proven to 100% precision. Basically means it's true. This universe had an origin. And the point is that this argument that the universe had an origin is coming from other philosophers and scientists, people who have no philosophical reason to believe it. We're getting to point number 2. Was the universe caused or uncaused? All right, so I have a box here. And it is the beginning of the universe. Who wants it?
It's kind of a scary thing to.
For time's sake, I'm gonna give it to this guy, but you guys can share whatever's inside. Open it and tell me what's inside.
Nothing.
Nothing. So, wait. So if I told you that the universe started from what was inside that box, and you say that it's nothing, what would you tell me?
Still nothing.
Yeah, you probably tell me I was crazy, right?
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people, believe it or not, really smart people who argue for this. I'll take that box away. You can keep what was inside, but kind of like the wallet we saw there earlier, right? It was really, what's in my wallet? Nothing, right? So, but there are really smart people out there who actually will argue and use words like nothing as though it means something. And they'll say, well, we got everything, the whole universe from nothing. Doesn't that sound a little crazy? Like, because how are you supposed to get something from nothing? It's nothing. Really, that's my only point. Was the universe caused or uncaused? It had to be caused, because it can't, to say that the whole universe started from nothing is kind of ridiculous. Yeah, right? Because nothing is nothing. It's not rocket science.
I have something to go on. It says in the Bible that, God is the Alpha and the Omega, so, what created him?
We're going to get into that, right? So the universe must have had a cause. It must have had a beginning, and it seems that something must have caused it. That was just a funny picture I saw it on. But, now, was that cause personal or impersonal? Einstein opted for the impersonal, but he probably didn't think it through, because, see, Einstein didn't want to believe in the Christian God because he had an issue with the problem of human suffering and evil in the world. Even though he probably didn't realize that the exact existence of evil is probably one of the biggest reasons to believe in God. Because if there's evil, then there must be, if evil doesn't exist, then it's just personal preference. Torturing babies for fun is just whether you want to do it or not. It doesn't matter if it's good, right, or wrong. But if it is wrong, then maybe there's something more to that to prove there's actually a God. So there are two kinds of causes. And we're going to look at both of these here. The first one is called event causation. So obviously you see here the dominoes falling, right? Dominoes tipping over, hitting the other one. An event cause is a spontaneous, impersonal result of previous factors when the conditions are right. So let's say the ground shakes and a building falls over. You can always ask, well, what caused that? What caused the building to fall over? Well, it was an earthquake. Well, what caused the earthquake? Well, it was tectonic plates shifting underneath the ground. Okay, well, what caused that? Well, it was the lava flow. Well, what caused that? And what are we doing? Why, right? And what have we already discovered about, trying to hit an infinite series of events of whys? Yeah, right? It keeps going back until you get to a beginning. You can't get an infinite number of events, so a mere event couldn't have caused the universe, because if it was an event, you'd always get back to that, well, what caused that? Well, what caused that? Well, what caused that? So you can't go back infinitely. So the other type of causation is called agent causation. So from that first picture, what's the difference between this picture and that picture? The hand, right? Somebody's pushing down the dominoes. It's called agent causation. Agents decide. Free will is in the operation. If Joey was to hit you, I would be like, Joey, why'd you do that? And you're like, I don't know, I just wanted to, right? I just did it. So when you have an agent acting, the cause is in the will of the agent. So you guys go home tonight, maybe champagne, you want to go back home, right? Champagne. You go back home, let's say you get home, and your room has been absolutely destroyed. Something, someone, whatever has gone in there and just, not carpentry, no, okay, like stuff's destroyed, beyond recognition. Now, you could say that it looks like a tornado hit, but you know that tornadoes, if you go home and a tornado hasn't hit your house because there hasn't been any, weather issues to cause that to happen, what is your default question then next?
Siblings.
Who did it, right? Now, if you don't know what did it, then you say, well, you would ask who did it.
Right.
So it when event causation can't explain something, then agent causation is what you automatically have to go to. Because if you look at who, when, where, what, why, if you can't get something from what, your default is who. So if a what can't explain it, we have to go to a who, a person or an individual who chose to make that event happen. So when we're talking about the Big Bang Theory, if we can't get a what out of what caused it, then the only question we're left with is who. So maybe we get into the next. So what caused God? Because it said anything that came into being must have had a cause. But God is not the kind of being who ever comes into being, so he has no cause. You'll say, well, Eric, now you're cheating. Now you're cheating. You just said the universe can't live forever, so how can God live forever? I didn't assert that the universe can't live forever, although I did give you an argument that it couldn't live forever based on the kinds of things we've discovered the universe to be, which is a non-infinite series of historical events. I wasn't arguing that nothing can be forever, just that this universe can't be an infinite series of events, and God is not an infinite series of events. So he's not the kind of thing that falls into this category. So this lesson is basically shown to prove that a personal agent was made to create the universe, and it's fair to fall back on the capital G word for that. The explanation is it's God, because he's the only explanation, and there are no problems with that explanation. So if that is true, if everything I've just told you is completely true, then atheism is refuted. It's false. Just think about that for a second. And if this is true, then there is a God. Now, could I be wrong? Maybe. But you're going to have to show me scientifically that the universe is infinitely old, which is scientifically false, or that everything that came into being came from nothing, which is rationally incredible. So remember, what is at stake here? You bet your life. Psalm 14:1 says, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God."